Welcome to Echoes in the Gallery. I am your host, Susan L. Sistrunk. As a lifelong artist and educator, I am proud to bring you my first original podcast set in a series of volumes. Each episode will air weekly on Spreaker, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Tonight, in Episode 7, The Process, we will learn how Gwen and Jonathan have created their fiction. Let us step into the gallery and begin. Episode 7, The Process. What the hell? Tuturea shouted across the table. I mean, really, what the hell? Ivanov is not someone you lie to and play with like he is a child. What were you thinking? She was shaking from the rage of this new development. How were they going to get out of this without Jonathan and Gwen ending up dead? She took a slow drink from her glass, sat back, and looked at Gwen. Tell me everything. Well, Gwen began, you know we started with the forgeries for him to sell overseas. He paid us well, and we were in so much debt from the gallery. Jonathan winced because he knew that part was his fault, and if not for the money problems, they would not be in this situation. Gwen took a look at Jonathan and placed her hand on his. It was after forging the Renoir he started asking us to find paintings for his own collection. Obscure works by little-known Impressionist artists. At first, he knew exactly what he was looking for, and it was legal the way we were going about it. I would go to the auction house and look at the lots and contact Ivanov. He would give me a green light or a red light. No worries, right? Then he starts asking me to find artists who no one had ever heard of and said he would pay us a $40,000 finder fee for each one we found for him. It worked at first. Not only were we able to start digging ourselves out of debt, but we were working legitimately, or so we thought. Then it became harder to find these rare works for him, and about a year ago I had an idea. There are many unfamiliar artists who live in the Impressionist era. Instead of spending hours researching, why not just make them up? It's not like he would know any better, right? Impressionist paintings are some of the most commonly forged due to the fact that it is easier to find correct materials. It becomes more difficult and expensive as the history of art moves back in time. So that's what I did. Tuturea looked her in the eyes. Exactly how many of these have you given him? Gwen returned her gaze. 3. How do you convince him the artist is real? Tuturea asked softly. Pull out your phone and Google Romanov's Cervona. 10 seconds later, Tuturea was spellbound. You created all of this content? This guy has his own Wikipedia page, for Christ's sake. She was looking at the biography of an artist who grew up in rural Romania, was raised poor on a farm, and had a passion for art from an early age. Romanov was taken under the wing of a master in Bucharest in 1887 after a happenstance encounter in the village where he lived. His parents encouraged him to move to Bucharest to study under the master, as Romanov's options would have been minimal at best in the small village. It went on and on for pages. A complete history of an artist who never existed. Oh my God, Tuturea whispered. Yep, if you're going to do it, go big or go home, Gwen said, pressing the ice pack to her face. Jonathan looked at Gwen. What are we going to do? I have a plan, she whispered. Now, would you like to tell me what your interest in Ivanov is? Tuturea leaned forward, set her glass on the table, and began to speak. An hour later, Gwen sat back in stunned silence. No wonder you hate him. What a monster! So what is your plan? Maybe we can all help each other. Tuturea smiled. That's exactly what I have in mind. Gwen turned her attention to Jonathan. I have 2 days to make that painting look like an original and convince Ivanov we have completed the heist. The illusion must look real. Tuturea spoke up. You get to work on the painting. Jonathan and I will work with Sergei on the illusion of the couple leaving town. She looked at both of them. Let's get to work. This is only the first phase of what we have to do. Meanwhile, in his office, Ivanov pondered the situation and looked at Eric. Do you think she was telling the truth? Hard to say. I guess we'll find out soon enough. She won't run without Jonathan. We should pick him up and hold him. No. If she's telling the truth, she will need Jonathan to complete the switch. Ivanov sighed. Keep an eye on her. Forget Jonathan. She's a gifted forger. I will give her that. I've never met better. We will need her in the future. Back at the gallery, Jordan unlocked the front door. He crept inside and turned off the security system and walked through the gallery to the back office. After flipping on the light, he sat down at the desk. Working at night allowed him the privacy he needed. Gwen and Jonathan were great employers, but this was a lot. Every once in a while, Jordan felt his nerves start to rise, and his fingers would tremble at the keyboard. This was a lot to do. Vast amounts of content to create, and it took great concentration. Jordan had hoped the last one would be the last one, but they wanted one more. This was for a different buyer, though, and he was glad. Ivanov scared him. Okay, he whispered under his breath as the light on the computer came up. Time to make another artist look real. You're going to do what? Tuturea looked at Gwen like lobsters were crawling out of her ears. I have to age it somehow. This is what I always do. It cures the pain, ages the canvas, and works well. It's just time-consuming, so we have to start now. Don't you have something you need to be doing? This is my part. I'm just trying to understand. What are you putting on the back of the painting? Linseed oil. The heat will turn it yellow, making the painting look aged at the back. Gwen spread a thin layer as Tuturea watched in amazement. How do you know this will work? Because it's worked 3 other times. Gwen put the cap on the bottle and opened the oven. 150 degrees for 45 minutes, 1 hour to cool, then back in for 5 to 8 rotations, depending on how fast it starts to age. With that, she picked up the painting and slid it into the foil-covered rack and closed the door to the oven. On the back porch, Jonathan looked up at the stars while smoking a cigarette. Gwen wasn't a fan of him smoking, but he needed to take the edge off. His head was pounding from the events of the last 24 hours. How was he going to fix this? Just then his phone rang. Hello, Jonathan. How are you? Jonathan recognized Rachel's voice at once and felt a stab of guilt for being deceitful towards Gwen. Luckily, this job was all ready to go. He stepped further into the yard behind the apartment building. How are you? Jonathan couldn't let Gwen know about this. She would be furious. I'm not really one for chit-chat, Jonathan. Is the painting ready for the switch? Ready to go. And we need to do it this week. The painting is only on loan for another 2 weeks at the gallery. How does Friday sound? We can make the switch in daylight, just have it wrapped, and it will look like just another painting is walking out the door. They wrapped up the conversation, and Jonathan finished his cigarette. This concludes episode 7, The Process. Please join me, your host, Susan L. Sistrunk, next week for episode 8, The Setup. Until then, stay safe and love each other.